Necromancers are one of the most popular classes in the Diablo universe, and with Season 2's launch, Overpower just got even stronger than it was before. In this video today, we're going to go through an updated version of my Vampire Endgame build that I've been using since the launch of the game. We're geared very heavily towards using Overpower, using Rathma's Chosen, and a bunch of other abilities that allow us to guarantee that Overpower. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things here is by upfronting the knowledge in my videos so you can decide to stick around if you so wish. So with that being said, the entire guide to what I'm talking about is linked in the description and the pinned comment below. You'll head on over to Mobalytics and it has everything. It's going to have all the aspects, all of it. So if you don't want to watch the video and you just kind of want to take a look at a guide, you can go ahead and look at that. Although you can use this build to level, I had it built out with a end game in mind. So the leveling track on there is just me clicking and choosing things as fast as I can. It's not me doing it in a per level basis. I have a leveling build with my bloody golem build, in which case I use blood and a golem. You can find that linked in the upper right hand corner as well as in that build as well. But if that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to shut the video on down and get back to enjoying the game as a necromancer. But before you head out, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. Each one of those things does help me out in an absolute huge way. I currently have 89% unsubscribed viewer base on the channel right now, and that is a metric I am trying to change by the end of the year. You can jump ahead to any part of this video that interests you the most using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. And if you're looking for any other subjects to get help on with Diablo 4, I have a whole link to all of my guides in the end of the video and in the description below. Well, let's get started here on my endgame build, my Vampire Overpower Necromancer build for Diablo 4. So to start off, let's take a look at our skills. We're going to be opening up with Reap as our primary kind of corpse generating skill. This is not necessarily what we're going to be using the majority of the time. We're going to focus on Blood Surge. Reap is there to generate some essence for us, do some things, helps out with some damage reduction. The primary case that we want it for, though, is Reap forms a corpse under the first enemy hit, can only occur every 4 seconds. So this is just a nice way for us to get corpses on demand. In my previous iteration of this build, I was using Blood Mist and using all the many ways that you can generate corpses through Blood Mist. It just became way too tedious. I will tell you up front, this build does struggle with single target boss damage in the sense that it just takes a little bit of time. You'll hit lulls where there's no corpses, there's nothing to do, you're topped out on energy, but you'll be able to ramp up plenty of damage and stack up Rathmas in the meantime. It's just you're going to have a very, I could say like inconsistent time when it comes to bosses. You might burst them down very quickly, you might have a little lull time, it just depends. Into Blood Surge being our most important skill in this build. So there are 3 ways to overpower in this build. Naturally through Rathma's Chosen, second naturally through Blood Surge, and third naturally, second naturally, those aren't even terms, through our Vampiric Power Blood Boil. But Blood Surge here is nice in that it does damage and then expels a Blood Nova, dealing more damage, and then the damage that is done, Blood Surge's Nova damage is increased by 10% per enemy drained up to 50%. So we get a lot of value out of this skill, and we're going to be dropping aspects into it and focusing on increasing its damage as much as we can, enhancing it to allow it to heal us, and also if 4 or more enemies are drawn from, then heal for an additional 2.5% max life, and we're going to be using rubies to increase our max life. Paranormal Blood Surge here allows us to overpower Blood Surge after 5 stacks of overwhelming blood. And pretty much you just cast it 5 times and you'll be able to overpower. So it's a nice kind of guaranteed overpower. We're using Blood Mist as our get out of jail free card. This is nice in that it allows us to essentially become unstoppable. Becoming immune for 3 seconds, your movement speed is reduced by 20%, and you periodically deal 2% damage to enemies and heal for 0.7%. Casting it overpower reduces the cooldown of Blood Mist by 2 seconds. And then Blood Mist leaves behind a corpse every 1 second. So we do get corpses from this. The main thing here is just basically it gives us a nice get out of jail free card, and we can move around the battlefield if we need to. And with Ghost Walkers, we can kind of get a little bit of extra utility out of this because Ghost Walkers is going to last after these 3 seconds are up. We'll get a little bit of a movement speed buff and we'll still be unstoppable. Death's Embrace is going to just increase our damage here, while also being dealt less damage. Amplified damage increases damage to cursed enemies. We'll be using Decrepify for our curse here, so it slows down enemies and they do less damage from us. Lucky hit will effectively decryptify, have a 10% chance to be stunned, and anytime we can stun enemies, anything like that is always a nice kind of layering of the cake. Abhorrent decryptify, enemies hit while affected with decryptify have up to a 15% chance to reduce your active cooldowns. This is mainly going to be focused on Blood Mist here, to just reduce those cooldowns, as well as Blood Mist enhanced capability here. I did forget, imperfectly balanced, your core skills cost 9% more essence, but deal 15% more damage. We want to be able to increase the damage in this as much as we can. Jumping down into the next area, yeah, I covered those two. We have Corpse Tendrils. Now, Corpse Tendrils is extremely important here because basically what it's going to allow us to do is we cast it on a corpse. It does not consume that corpse, which is lovely, and it's going to pull everything in. You deal 20% more damage to them. It gets stunned. It's lovely. Then enemies who are in range of Corpse Tendrils are now slowed in addition to being stunned. And Corpse Tendrils has a 35% chance to drop a Blood Orb when damaging enemies, and Blood Orbs are going to be lovely for us when we take a look at Paragon points and such. It's going to just give us a ton of damage and utility. So Blood Orbs are a resource that we want to really tap into since we are a Blood build. Now, we also want to get all of the Blood passives here. Gruesome Mending, that's just a means to an end. It opens up here into Coalesce Blood. While healthy, your blood skills deal 18% increased damage. We want to increase this through skills in any way possible because we will be healthy a lot of the time with this build. Tides of Blood, your blood skills deal 15% increased overpower damage. This bonus is doubled while you're healthy. So ideally, we would get 30% increased overpower damage with Tides of Blood because Rathma's Chosen does not stack unless we are healthy anyway. And then lastly, Drain Vitality. Lucky hit, hitting enemies with blood skills has up to a 30% chance to fortify you for 8% max life. We're going to be relying on Fortify because Fortify is part of the damage equation for Overpower. So we want to make sure we're trying to drive this up as much as we can. Hence the increase in max life and Fortify in this build. We also have Necrotic Carapace. When a corpse is formed from your skills or your minions, Fortify for 4% max life. Previously, when I had this build, we went down this, which is all about increasing damage for the consumption of corpses. Since we're focused more on the generation of them, say through Blood Mist, say through Reap, I'd rather get the guaranteed Fortify here with Necrotic Carapace. It's quite good. I only have 2 points into it because it was just kind of the 2 points I had left over. If you want to squeeze a third in by reducing maybe, I don't know, Blood Mist, by all means, go for it. It's not going to like drastically change anything for you, but you can just kind of do it if you so wish. Into our final portion, the ultimate portion, we have Blood Wave. Now, Blood Wave is not this like apex destroyer of worlds ultimate. What's nice about it is we're going to use the tidal aspect to get 2 more waves out of every cast of Blood Wave. And you can see that it does a knockback, which is cool. These are all CCs. 120% damage, lovely. It slows enemies, another form of CC, but now it leaves behind 3 Blood Orbs as it travels. So this allows us to get 9 Blood Orbs whenever we cast Blood Wave. It's a very awesome way to just kind of add that Blood Orb utility into the build. We're, of course, not going with any kind of summon, so we're going with standalone. So we get 18% DR just because we have gotten no minions. And then we've sacrificed both of our skeletal warriors and mages, so we get 60% bonus on the sacrifice of their respective bonuses. And we're also going to go with Inspiring Leader. Now this, of course, applies to your minions, but it applies to you. After being healthy for at least 2 seconds, which is the same requirement here for Rathma's Chosen, you get 12% increased attack speed. So it's very, very lovely here. Just kind of helps you use Reap quite a bit. And lastly, I keep calling it Rathma's Chosen. It's Rathma's Vigor. Rathma's Chosen is the aspect. So Rathma's Vigor is our capstone. After being healthy for 12 seconds, your next blood skill overpowers. This timer is reduced by 2 seconds each time blood orbs heal or overheal you for an amount greater than or equal to your base life. So you have all of these little ditties up to your disposal here that you can do quite a bit with this build. For the skills, though, in the Book of the Dead, since they are kind of connected to the skill tree, here's what our skill bar would roughly look like. You can set this up however you so wish. Oops, this is not supposed to. That's supposed to be this one. There we go. So Tendrils, Blood Mist, followed by Blood Wave, Reap, Decrepify, and Blood Surge. Now, with Rathma's Vigor, it will trigger overpower on blood abilities. So what I would say is you'd want to use that Blood Mist or that Blood Wave as your overpower capability because Blood Surge has so many forms of overpower. I'd probably want to use it on a Blood Mist to help my single target damage against a boss. Or a Blood Wave when I have to deal with a bunch of things around me, I'll throw in a Blood Wave. And if you can stack this up nicely, Rathma's Vigor into a Blood Wave overpowered, into a Blood Surge overpowered, because you've just kind of stacked them just right, it's really nice. But maybe you're trying to wait for 1 or 2 stacks of Rathma's Vigor, or you're waiting to kind of wombo combo Blood Surge and Blood Wave with a overpower. Reap does not trigger Rathma's Vigor, so you can just use it. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. So you can use this as a means to just kind of do a little bit of extra damage, a little bit of utility, get some DR up, whatever it is, while you're waiting for 1 or 2 of those clicks of the stack to kick in. So I really like Reap. It's a new addition to this build, and I think it really adds a lot of weight to it. As far as our Book of the Dead, Skeletal Warriors here is going to give us 5% increased crit chance. Now this has been increased by 60%, of course. And then Skeletal Mage Bone, your overpower damage is increased by 40%, but you no longer raise Skeletal Mages. This has been increased by 60% because of our skill that we chose, right? And lastly, the Golem of Iron, you deal 30% increased crit strike damage. So these two kind of work in tandem with one another. But those are all of your skills and the Book of the Dead. Let's move into a conversation about equipment. Moving into a discussion about equipment here, our aspects, our gear. You can see that we have everything kind of laid out before you. If you hover over it, it'll show you that stat priority if you need that for that kind of top tier min-max roll. Now, all these things that have shields, they are easily just swapped out. So if say you have a helmet that's got a really good aspect of the protector, well, then just put might in your shield. Whatever you want to do, feel free to swap those around. Keep in mind for this build, I do use a shield. You can use a focus if you wish, but I don't want to. And you can use a two-handed weapon, but again, I don't want to. You can definitely use a two-handed weapon with Blood-Bathed Aspect, and it is quite good because of the bonus of 200%. But I like having just that additional survivability, and also shields were just recently made better with Season 2, better than they already were. So going through this, Helm of Might is going to give us 20% DR on top of the nice 15% DR that we get from Reap anyway. That's 35%, which is juicy. Aspect of Disobedience is going to give us 1.1% increased armor for 4 seconds, up to 66%. And since you can damage the entire screen with Blood Surge, it is a really awesome way to stack just a disgusting amount of armor. Also, we're going to go with, you know what, I'll talk about this one first because they wombo combo. Aspect of the Protector, damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier absorbing up to X damage for 10 seconds. This effect can only happen once every 30 seconds. Why I like Protector here instead of Protecting is that Protector allows us to insulate our Fortify. You have barrier that will then go over the Fortify which will go over your health. And the higher our Fortify is, the more damage we do with our Overpower. So this is just kind of a nice little pad on top of it. And in addition to that, since we are using a barrier, aspect of the Deflecting Barrier, while you have a barrier active, there is a 7 to 13% chance to ignore incoming direct damage from distant enemies. I do like this quite a bit. Now, as far as our offensive aspects go, we have Tidal Aspect. So our Blood Wave now fires 2 additional waves. So that gives us a total of 9 Blood Orbs. The waves do less damage each and every time. So try to get a max roll of this. A max roll is not 50%. A max roll is 40%, right? So each dealing 40% less damage rather than 50% less damage. In that same note, too, the Blood-Bathed Aspect, Blood Surges Nova, echoes again after a short delay, dealing 50% less damage. This one is absolutely crucial. You have to get it right when you start the game, and it's nice because it's right here in Fractured Peaks. But the crucial thing about this is that Blood Surge is costly. It does take a lot of essence to cast. So you basically get 2 casts out of 1 cast when you have this aspect, and it is the biggest thing that you need in the build. Again, you can put this on a two-handed weapon and it will be quite well, or work quite well for you. Aspect of Grasping Vines we have on the amulet here. So you gain 20% increased crit strike chance for 6 seconds when you cast Corpse Tendrils. You deal 40% bonus crit strike damage to enemies damaged by Corpse Tendrils. It's going to an amulet. So we're going to get a 50% bonus on both of those stats right there, right? So that's going to jump up to 30% increased crit strike and 60% crit strike damage, which stacks with this 5%, which gets a 60% bonus onto it from a skill, and this 40%. Oh, that's overpower damage. Never mind. And this 30% crit strike damage, which is just going to add flat into it. So it's just a nice, real juicy bump and spike to our damage. You could swap this with Blood-Bathed, but I think this is the power move right here. Into Rathma's Chosen, a new one for the build here. Whenever your blood skills overpower, you gain 20 to 50% attack speed for 4 seconds. It just turns us into a buzzsaw with our Reap, allowing us to stack quite a few corpse generation and quite a few other things. Lastly here, for our other abilities, we have got Aspect of the Umbral. Restore 4 of your primary resource when you crowd control an enemy. Remember, Corpse Tendrils does all of that. So Corpse Tendrils is going to be nonstop online, do a ton of this damage. You can use Blood Wave to do that. It's going to slow things down, knock them back. So a lot of resource gain with Aspect of the Umbral here. Now you can use as well Potent Blood. And while healthy, blood orbs grant 10 to 20 essence. Base it off of your essence needs. Do you need a lot more of essence? Then go ahead and put Potent Blood in place of Rathma's Chosen until you can kind of get away from requiring it in your build. But this is probably the ideal setup. Lastly, too, we have, I said last like 5 times, we have Ghostwalker Aspect. So while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after, you gain 10 to 25% increased movement speed and can move freely through enemies. Why this is so good is because Blood's Mist is going to allow us to trigger this, and we're going to get a 25% increased movement speed. Blood Mist, let's take a look at it. Nope. Yep. Your movement speed is reduced by 20% and you periodically deal. So this gets rid of that reduction and increases your movement speed actually by 5%. And then when Blood Mist falls off, you have 4 seconds of 25% increased movement speed. And this also keys off of Blood Boil. Nope. There it is, Metamorphosis. When you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for 4 seconds. So you basically have this going off all the time, and it's just going to make you completely ridiculous. And just keep in mind that you are the slowest class as a Necromancer. So if you're doing Season 2, this is going to be absolutely crucial for you to really keep up with the rest of the things, and Metamorphosis is an amazing ability. Outside of that, and we'll put that in its own section in case you aren't playing the season. We have rubies in all of the weapons because it's going to increase our overpower by 24%. Rubies in all of the armor because it increases our max life. And remember, overpower is keyed off of that difference in life and fortify. And lastly, we're going to put resistances in our jewelry just to make the resistance mini game a little bit easier to complete. That puzzle piece is a little bit easier to socket into when you have 15% resistance to all enemies set up. Now, you are a Necromancer, so you have a ton of intelligence, and that makes it way easier to solve your resistance problems to begin with, so keep that in mind as well. Now, in a conversation about our Vampiric Powers, we have quite a few fun ones. So the big one I want to start with was, again, Metamorphosis. When you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for 4 seconds. Enemies along your path take 160% physical damage and are inflicted with Vampiric Curse. Vampiric Curse is very strong, and you can use plenty of other Vampiric Powers to really kind of add into that. So keep that in the back of your mind. We have guaranteed Vampiric Curse. Now, Hemomancy here, your attacks deal 80% of your max life as physical damage to nearby enemies. This can only occur once every 4 seconds. You heal for 1% of your max life for each enemy damage this way. Why this is crucial is that Hemomancy is going to allow us to just kind of get free damage, and we're already stacking tons of life, so that number is going to be very strong and very potent. It's just passive AoE damage that we're already doing since we're pulling them into us. Blood Boil here, when your core skills overpower, Blood Surge, an enemy, you spawn 3 volatile blood drops. Collecting a volatile blood drop causes it to explode, dealing 60% physical damage around you. Every 20 seconds, your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. So this is just an additional layer of overpower for us. We can use this on a Blood Surge, we can use this on a Blood Wave, whatever we want. With 3 guaranteed overpowers in our build, well, I'd say 2 guaranteed overpowers in our build and a way to guaranteed overpower Blood Surge on its own, it's just so much damage coming at you. Prey on the Weak, you deal 16% increased damage to vuln enemies. Enemies are vulnerable while afflicted by a Vampiric Curse from your other Vampiric Powers. So, you now do more damage to vuln, and Metamorphosis guarantees us vuln because that's how it works, right? Enemies are vulnerable while affected by a Vampiric Curse. It's amazing. We don't have to build it into the build anymore because it's just we use Prey on the Weak. Then lastly, Sanguine Brace. When you kill an enemy, fortify for 6% of your base life. While you have more fortify than half of your maximum life, you deal 8% crit strike chance. So fortify is already just so baked into the build that it just is a no-brainer to go with this Vampiric Power. All right, now for the Paragon board, I'm just going to simply touch on the glyphs we've placed into here. If you want to look at the actual track, you can go ahead and take a look at that link in the lower corner. It's in the description. The first one here, we put control. Now, this is crucial because this is going to allow you to deal increased damage to crowd control targets. We've already talked about that being a prevalent portion of this build. You deal 10% increased damage to slowed or chilled enemies. Instead, 20% increased damage to stunned or frozen enemies. Since we stun and slow with corpse tendrils, and we can do all sorts of crazy stuff with crowd control, this is just a huge layer of damage added into the build. We also have up here Dominate. For every 5 willpower purchase within range, you deal 7.85 increased overpower damage. Don't really look at the numbers in this because it gets a little funky because of the way that this whole thing is set up. It's just, the important thing is you increase your willpower, you'll get increased overpower damage, which already increases your willpower. And when you overpower an enemy, they take 12% increased damage for 5 seconds, which is juicy. On the left over here, we get a little bit of survivability. So magic nodes are increased, which is lovely, but blood orbs fortify you for 6.7 of your max life. If you need survivability, feel free to put Blood Drinker into this location and just get it online as fast as you can. If you're really suffering with survivability, feel free to do that. And it's easier to get this 40 intelligence right here than it is up over here. This requires you to level up the glyph. So just kind of keep that in mind. Blood Drinker and Control can be swapped out as needed, depending upon your damage and or survivability needs. Our last two, we have Territorial. You get 2% increased damage for close targets and gain 15% DR against close enemies. And lastly, we have Sacrificial. I've recently put this one in here. You deal 10% increased damage while you have no active minions, which will be you the entirety of this build. There are some things that you can kind of swap out and kind of go crazy with this build, but the big thing you want to make sure you're doing when it comes to the Paragon board, your legendary nodes, you focus on your legendary nodes, focus on those last. With at least 2 corpses nearby, you gain 15% DR. Cool. With no corpses nearby, you get 15% damage. Awesome. But the only legendary node, if you really wanted to get it quickly, would be, was it this one? Blood Orbs grant 5% increased damage up to 15% for 5 seconds. So if you really want to get that one online, you definitely can. I mean, we used to use this one, but we don't consume corpses anymore. So a lot of your legendary nodes are not crucial to the build. This one with Bloodbath is very good. It deals 35% increased overpower damage, but it requires quite the foray to get here. Your real power spike comes from your glyphs, not from legendary nodes. Don't kind of get led down that path of pursuing them, because if you think about it, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Let's just round it to an even 20. That is essentially 5 levels of a detour away from glyphs that are just going to pure increase the damage or survivability of your character. So really focus on those glyphs before you do the legendary nodes. As far as our rotation goes for this character, we'll be focusing on opening up with Reap. We want to be able to get that damage reduction online as fast as possible. So you'd walk into a room and press this, simultaneously kind of triggering Decrepify as well, slowing things down. Remember, this is going to slow things down. Territorial is going to kick in. All the things that kick in whenever we do any kind of CC is going to make it better, and they deal 20% less damage. So you'd press left click and you do that, and there you go. You've just kind of CC'd the room. And from there, you could pretty much kill through the majority of chaff by just simply right clicking and pressing Blood Surge, which you see shoots out 2 quick novas. Now, whenever you right click, it will just kind of draw from everyone around you, which will immediately trigger tons of your Aspect of Might, so giving you lots of additional armor. Now, once you've done 1v1 Reap and you've probably generated a corpse, ideally Blood Nova or Blood Surge should be used when you do this. Your tendrils are reaching out, and now they would all be kind of congregated right there. We'd right click and we'd just blow them all up. Or conversely too, we could simply kind of angle it properly and use Blood Wave. Blood Wave is not angled off. If you're on PC, if I'm facing this way, my Blood Wave is not going to go the direction I'm facing. It goes where my cursor is. If you see I'm facing to the south of the screen, right over here, I'm going to point my thing over, my cursor over here, and I'm going to press Blood Wave. So it casts that direction. It will cast perpendicular to wherever your cursor is, right? So just when you're aiming Blood Wave, try to aim it with wherever your cursor is. I mean, I kind of still aim it with my face because I think it just kind of makes a little bit more sense for the way I'm moving my character. So it's entirely up to you. Now you also will use Blood Mist to get out of jail free, but also take a look here at your Rathma's Vigor. This is the ability that's going to allow us to trigger our overpower. So at 12 stacks, your next blood skill will overpower. So that's when I would use maybe Blood Mist here, and that would trigger it, and I would start to use it, and it would consume that stack and generate some corpses for me, whatever it is. Or I would use it in conjunction with Blood Wave, whatever the case is, because if you overpower Blood Wave, so let's just say this did 9,000 damage, and then we know it's going to do 2 more waves that are less and less, right? Well, if we overpower that, it's going to do less and less of the overpowered damage, not its parent damage. So it does a considerable amount. And lastly, too, Blood Surge. Let's cast. Oh, we have to hit enemies. If you have to hit enemies, and this will get its stacks, and this will guaranteed overpower. In addition to Blood Boil, which is going off every 20 seconds. So we have tons of layering to be added into this build. Before we actually jump into the gameplay portion of this, I just want to showcase the character I'm using. This is my Eternal character, not an actual seasonal character. So you playing this in the season is going to be far stronger. And I will say too, you're about to see, I think it's like level 37 Nightmare Dungeon. This character can go higher, but I have not yet actually worked on prioritizing their resistances because I've been playing this season. But I wanted to at least kind of make these things be known that this character is underpowered and it's still performing quite well. Just as a bit of transparency there, right? And also to take a look at my overpower damage. Extra power granted to skills when they overpower further increases the moment of impact based on your max life and fortify amount. Includes the inherent increased damage dealt by overpowers based on your current life up to 50% when at max life. You have plus 722% of this stat from willpower, items, and Paragon. So your overpower is going to just be disgusting if you build this right for the class. And you will see that, I mean, this character actually has some pretty good min-maxed items on him, but I don't have the aspects all set up 100% and properly. A lot of them are kind of just hodgepodged around because I have at least somewhat of an idea of how I wanted this to go. So you'll see this. You could even swap out some of these too. I didn't talk about it in the gear section, but if you really wanted to, you could put Aspect of the Blood Mist on your shield if you want, I believe. Explosive is, yes, it can go on shield. So you could put this on the shield if you want to get a little bit more utility out of your Blood Mist, and then kind of trigger more stuff with consuming corpses. But I wanted to kind of get away from that because it's a little ramshot and it's not as reliable, and the damage is not that considerable either. So if you're wondering why it's not on the build, that's why. It's just not as reliable as a aspect as it used to be in the previous iterations of the game. But just a bit of transparency on my character before jumping into the gameplay. So after all said and done, what are my thoughts on this build? And to be honest, this was my favorite build going into the start of the game. It was shit on by quite a few people because it wasn't a bone build, right? You're not going to be doing stacks and heaps of millions and millions of damage, but to me that was really boring and it didn't really feel very cool or thematic. I've been using this blood build since the game started, and it's my favorite build in the game, maybe barring like the Walking Arsenal Barbarian. And it's just mean and it's crunchy, and you're doing these novas of blood damage that do tons of damage, and then all the new vampiric powers just add so many layers to this. And what I like about those vampiric powers is in this gameplay you're watching right now, you're going to find moments where I just stall out. Randomly I'll just find like a single monster, none of my overpowers are up, my fortify isn't triggered, and I'm really not able to kill it. It's a level 91 POS monster. That just happens sometimes. That's why in this build you have to push through packs. You can't just sit there and go, oh, there's 3 enemies, I'm going to clear them out. No, just train them into the next pack. There's no reason to kind of suffer through trying to kill 1 or 2 people and like, this is underpowered. What am I doing to myself? But what I like about this is I'm just nigh invincible. Yes, your resistances are going to be a big factor now, and that's something to strongly consider with this and all builds, because resistances do need to be worked on and stacked. In the gear portion of this, you need to really work on any resistances you're lacking from your jewelry. Your jewelry is going to be your front line to build those resistances out, and then you'll kind of socket them in from your legs, your chest. I think it's boots can also have a little bit of resistances on them, maybe helmet. I know shields can though too. So you just kind of work in your resistances as you can, as you need to patch up any holes, and do make sure you work on any kind of resistances from potions, since they give you an increase to your max and whatnot. But This build is gonna suit you very well leveling up. It's going to be an absolute monster in the end game. And like I said, because Overpower it was strong and just got way stronger, this is really, really a good build that can push into a lot of fun content that isn't like that top meta, over 9 million DPS build. It's just a fun thematic build that if I were to kind of put this on an F to an S tier ranking, it's a strong A, depending on the player and their gear and perhaps the Nightmare Dungeon, a low S. It just kind of depends upon what you're dealing with. And if you have a really good knowledge of how each one of your overpowers can trigger. And again, too, with those new Vampiric Powers, it makes this build really take off with just so much survivability from Metamorphosis, so much more guaranteed overpower and increased overpower damage, so much increased damage to all the enemies you are vulning with Metamorphosis. It's just absolutely silly and disgusting with what you can do with those new Vampiric Powers. But hopefully this gives you an idea of a really fun, really great and thematic, especially for this season, Necromancer build to play out in Diablo 4. If you have any questions or you say, hey, you know what? I took a look at the build and you went this route on the Paragon and it didn't make a lot of sense for me, so I went this route. Please play this build however the fuck you want. Do not listen to the internet and its way to tell you how to play. You spent money on a game. Enjoy the game however you want to do it. If this is a guide that you want to follow one-to-one, please, by all means. But I want this to be a blueprint for you on your enjoyment of Diablo 4. Take parts of this and throw them out. Take parts of it and use them to the best of your ability. This should simply just kind of be a recipe for you to create the Blood Necromancer of your dreams. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.